A powerful judge lay motionless in the finest hospital in Johannesburg, and not a single doctor in the building could explain why. His wife had flown in specialists from London. She had called experts in New York. She had begged every medical professional she could find. But every answer was the same. We do not know what is wrong with him. And while the judge's body grew weaker with each passing day, a young woman carrying nothing but a torn suitcase stepped off a crowded minibus on the other side of the city. She had no money. She had no connections. She had no idea that she was about to do what the best minds in medicine could not. But we will get to that part soon. Let us start from the beginning. The rain had not stopped falling over the village of Moketsi for 3 days straight. The dirt roads turned to rivers of brown water. Children stayed inside their small homes. The market stalls sat empty, and inside a tiny house at the edge of the village, a young woman named Nyasha knelt beside a wooden bed. On that bed lay an old woman. Her name was Mama Thandeka. She was Nyasha's grandmother and the only family Nyasha had left in this world. Mama Thandeka had raised Nyasha since she was a small girl. Nyasha's parents had passed away when she was barely 5 years old. She did not remember their faces clearly. But she remembered everything about her grandmother. Mama Thandeka was known throughout the village, and even in the surrounding areas. People called her a healer. She worked with plants. She worked with roots. She worked with leaves from deep inside the forest. When the clinic in the nearest town ran out of medicine, people came to Mama Thandeka. When a child had a fever that would not break, they came to her. When an old man lost the strength in his legs, they came to her door. And Nyasha had always been right there beside her. From the time she was a little girl, she followed her grandmother into the bush. She watched, she listened, she carried the basket, she ground the herbs on the flat stone behind the house. She learned which leaves could bring down swelling. She learned which roots could calm a stomach. She learned which bark, when boiled for hours, could ease pain that even the clinic tablets could not touch. Mama Thandeka would often look at her and say, "Nyasha, my child, the earth speaks to those who listen. You have good ears. Never forget what I teach you." Nyasha never forgot. But now, Mama Thandeka was the one who was sick. And this time the herbs could not help. The old woman's body had simply grown tired. She was very old. Her hands, which had once crushed roots with so much strength, could no longer hold a cup of water. Her voice, which had once called out instructions across the compound, was now barely a whisper. Nyasha held her grandmother's hand gently. "Mama, please, you must eat something." Mama Thandeka opened her eyes slowly. She looked at Nyasha for a long time. Then she spoke in a voice so quiet that Nyasha had to lean close to hear. "My child, I am not afraid. I have lived a full life." Tears ran down Nyasha's cheeks. "Please do not say that." The old woman squeezed her hand weakly. "Listen to me. You carry everything I know inside you. Do not let it die with me. Use it. Help people. That is your purpose." Nyasha could not speak. She just held her grandmother's haita. 2 days later, Mama Thandeka passed away quietly in her sleep. The rain had finally stopped. The sun came out over Moketsi as if the sky itself was paying respect. The entire village came for the burial. People cried, people sang. People told stories about the old healer who had saved so many lives. But when the crowd left and the house became silent, Nyasha sat alone on the floor. The emptiness was unbearable. Every corner of the small house reminded her of her grandmother. The basket by the door, the grinding stone outside, the bundles of dried herbs hanging from the ceiling. Everything was still there, but the person who gave all those things meaning was gone. Days passed. Nyasha barely ate. She barely slept. The village women brought her food, but she could not bring herself to swallow more than a few bites. One evening, as she sat outside staring at the darkening sky, she heard footsteps approaching. "Nyasha." She turned. A woman stood near the gate. Her name was Portia. Portia had grown up in the same village, but she left many years ago to find work in the city. The two of them had been close friends since childhood. Portia had returned for the burial but stayed a few extra days because she was worried about Nyasha. Portia sat beside her on the ground. For a moment neither of them spoke. Then Portia broke the silence. "You cannot stay here alone." Nyasha did not look at her. "Where else would I go? Come with me to Johannesburg." Portia said, "I have a small place. You can stay with me until you find your feet." Nyasha shook her head slowly. I do not know the city. I would not know what to do there. Portia touched her shoulder. You know how to work hard. You know how to care for people. That is more than enough. She paused. There are agencies in the city. They connect people who need care with people who can provide it. Cooking, cleaning, looking after the sick. You could do that easily. Nyasha stared at the ground. She knew Portia was right. There was nothing left for her in Moketsi. No family, no income. The small garden behind the house was already drying up. She could not survive here alone forever. But leaving the village meant leaving everything she had ever known. Portia stood up. I am going back to the city in 3 days. Think about it. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small piece of paper. This is my address. If you decide to come after I leave, you can find me. Nyasha took the paper without saying a word. The next 3 days were the longest of her life. She walked through the village. She visited her grandmother's grave. She sat under the big tree where Mama Thandeka used to tell her stories about the plants and the forest. On the last night, she packed a small bag. She placed a few clothes out inside. Then she looked at the bundles of dried herbs hanging from the ceiling. She carefully took a handful of dried leaves and wrapped them in a cloth. She did not know why. She just felt she should carry something of her grandmother with her. The next morning, she locked the door of the small house and walked to the road where the minibus waited. She did not look back. The journey to Johannesburg took many hours. The minibus rattled along dusty roads, then smoother ones. The landscape changed from fields and small houses to large buildings and busy highways. Nyasha watched through the window in silence. Everything looked enormous. Everything moved fast. When the bus finally stopped in the city, Nyasha stepped down carefully. People rushed past her in every direction. Cars honked. Street vendors called out their prices. The noise was overwhelming. She looked at the piece of paper in her hand and asked a woman selling fruit for directions. After walking for almost 30 minutes, she found the building. She climbed the narrow stairs and knocked on the door. Portia opened it with a wide smile. Nyasha, you came. Nyasha let out a breath she did not know she had been holding. I came. Portia pulled her inside. The room was small. One bed, a tiny kitchen, a window that faced a wall. But it was clean and it was warm. It is not much, Portia said, but it is safe. It is more than enough, Nyasha replied softly. That night the two women sat on the bed and talked for hours. Portia explained how the city worked. She told Nyasha about the care agencies that placed workers in wealthy homes. She told her about the pay, the hours, the expectations. Tomorrow morning, Portia said, I will take you to the agency I know. They are always looking for reliable people. Nyasha nodded. Thank you, Portia. I will never forget this. Portia smiled. You would do the same for me. The next morning, they walked to a small office building near the center of the city. A sign on the front read, Premier Home Care Services. Inside, a woman behind a counter greeted them politely. Good morning. How can I help you? Portia spoke first. My friend is looking for work. She is hard-working and experienced in caring for people. The woman looked at Nyasha. What is your name? Nyasha. Nyasha, do you have any experience with home care? Nyasha hesitated for a moment. Then she spoke honestly. I cared for my grandmother for many years. She was a healer in our village. I helped her treat people. I cooked for her, cleaned for her, and looked after her until the end. The woman nodded and wrote something down. We will add you to our list. When a position becomes available, we will contact you. Nyasha thanked her and they left. Over the next 2 weeks, Nyasha waited. Every time Portia's phone rang, she would hold her breath. But the call did not come. She began to worry. She helped Portia with household chores to feel useful. She cooked meals from whatever ingredients they could afford. She kept the small room spotless. Then one morning the phone rang. Hello? Portia answered. She listened for a moment, then her eyes went wide. She handed the phone to Nyasha. It is for you. Nyasha took the phone with shaking hands. Hello? Good morning. This is Premier Home Care Services. We have a placement for you. Nyasha pressed the phone tighter to her ear. Yes, ma'am? A very prominent family needs a personal care attendant. The employer's husband is seriously ill. They need someone immediately. Can you come to the office this morning? Yes, I will be there. An hour later, Nyasha sat in the office as the woman explained the details. The family is well known in Johannesburg. The husband is Judge Emmanuel Okafor. He has been bedridden for months with an illness that no doctor has been able to diagnose. Nyasha listened carefully. His wife, Mrs. Beatrice Okafor, manages the family business while caring for him. She needs someone who can be present during the day. You will help with feeding, cleaning, and monitoring his condition. You must be patient and compassionate. I understand, Nyasha said. Here is the address. You will begin tomorrow. When Nyasha arrived at the gate of the Okafor mansion the following morning, she stood still for a moment. The house was enormous. Iron gates, security cameras, a garden that stretched farther than she could see. She had never been inside a house this large in her entire life. She showed her papers to the security guard. He made a call, then opened the gate. A woman in uniform met her at the front door and led her through a wide hallway. The floors were marble. The walls held expensive paintings. Everything smelled of fresh flowers and cleaning products. They stopped in front of a large door. The woman knocked softly and opened it. Inside sat a woman at a desk. She was dressed beautifully, but her face told a different story. Her eyes were tired. Her shoulders were heavy. She looked like someone who had not slept properly in a very long time. You must be Nyasha, the woman said. Yes, ma'am. I am Beatrice. She did not smile, not because she was unkind, but because the weight on her heart was too great. Come, I will show you. They walked upstairs together. The hallway was long and quiet. At the end, Beatrice opened a door to a large bedroom. Inside, a man lay on a king-sized bed. Machines beeped beside him. A monitor displayed numbers that meant nothing to Nyasha, but the man himself told her everything she needed to know. His body was thin. His skin had lost its color. His arms lay at his sides as if they were made of stone. His eyes were open, but they looked distant, like a person trapped inside a body that no longer obeyed. Beatrice's voice cracked slightly. This is my husband, Emmanuel. He was the strongest man I ever knew. Nyasha said nothing. She just looked at the man on the bed. 6 months ago, he woke up one morning and said his legs felt numb. Beatrice continued. By the next week, he could not walk. 2 weeks after that, he could not use his arms. Now he can barely speak. Nyasha felt a heaviness settle in her chest. The doctors have run every test. They have consulted specialists in London, Toronto, and New York. Beatrice's voice dropped. No one can tell me what is wrong with him. No one. Nyasha nodded slowly. I will take good care of him, ma'am. Beatrice looked at her for a moment. Thank you. That is all I ask. Nyasha began her work that very day. She cleaned the room. She adjusted Emmanuel's pillows. She wiped his face with a warm cloth. She gave him water through a small straw. When it was time for his medication, she helped administer it carefully. She spoke to him in a calm, gentle voice. Good afternoon, sir. I am Nyasha. I will be here with you. Emmanuel's eyes moved toward her. He could not respond, but she could see that he understood. Days passed. Nyasha arrived every morning at 7 and stayed until Beatrice returned in the evening. She followed every instruction perfectly. The family doctor visited twice a week. He would check Emmanuel's vitals, shake his head, and leave without saying much. Each visit left Beatrice more broken than before. But Nyasha was not just performing her duties. She was watching, she was observing every detail. She noticed how Emmanuel's fingers would twitch at certain times of the day. She noticed how his breathing would change after meals. She noticed how the muscles in his neck tightened when someone adjusted his position too quickly. She noticed the faint discoloration beneath his fingernails. And slowly, a thought began to form in her mind. She had seen these signs before. Not in a hospital, not in a textbook, but in a small village house many years ago. A man named Sifo had come to Mama Thandeka's door one rainy evening. He had been carried by 4 men. His legs were completely paralyzed. His arms had begun to stiffen. Family said it had started with numbness and spread across his entire body within weeks. The clinic in the nearest town had given him pills that did nothing. Mama Thandeka had examined him carefully. She pressed certain points on his body. She looked at his nails. She looked at his eyes. Then she turned to Nyasha and said, "We need the deep forest route, the one near the river." They had walked far that day, past the usual paths, past the trees they normally visited, deep into a part of the forest that few people knew. Mama Thandeka had knelt beside a stream and dug into the soft earth with her hands. She pulled out a thick, dark root. This root, she told Nyasha, has the power to wake a sleeping body. When the nerves stop working and the muscles go cold, this is what the earth gives us. Over the following days, she prepared a mixture from the root, combined with certain leaves and bark. She boiled it, she strained it. She applied some of it to Sifo's skin and gave him the rest to drink. On the third night, Sifo moved his left hand. By the end of the week, he could sit up. Within a month, he walked home on his own feet. Now, standing in Judge Okafor's bedroom in Johannesburg, Nyasha felt that same recognition rising inside her. The twitching fingers, the stiff muscles, the progressive loss of movement spreading from the legs upward, the discolored nails. It was the same, she was almost certain. But she did not say a word, not yet. She was a maid in a wealthy household. She had no medical degree. She had no credentials. If she spoke out of turn, she could lose her job. She could embarrass herself. She could upset a powerful family during the worst moment of their lives. So she stayed quiet. She continued her work. But every night when she returned to Portia's small room, the thought kept her awake. What if I am right? She whispered to herself in the dark. What if the answer is sitting in my grandmother's forest and these doctors will never find it? Portia noticed something was troubling her. What is wrong? Is the family treating you badly? No, Nyasha said quickly. They are good people. Then what is it? Nyasha looked at her friend for a long time. Then she told her everything, the sick judge, the doctors with no answers, the familiar signs, the memory of Sifo, the root from the deep forest. Portia listened without interrupting. When Nyasha finished, Portia sat back and let out a slow breath. That is a big thing to say, Nyasha. I know, if you are wrong, you could lose everything. I know that too. Portia looked at her carefully. But what if you are right? That question stayed with Nyasha through the night and into the next morning. 2 more days passed. Emmanuel's condition grew worse. Beatrice came home from work one evening and sat beside the bed. She held his hand and cried. The sound of her weeping filled the entire upstairs hallway. Nyasha stood near the door, her heart breaking. That evening, Nyasha decided she could not stay silent any longer. As Beatrice was walking her to the front door, Nyasha stopped. Ma'am. Beatrice turned. Her eyes were still red. Yes? I need to tell you something. Please, hear me out. Beatrice studied her for a moment, then nodded. Nyasha spoke carefully. In my village, my grandmother was a healer. She used plants and roots from the forest to treat people. Many years ago, a man came to her with the same signs that I see in your husband. Beatrice's entire body went still. Nyasha continued. The numbness that started in the legs and moved upward. The stiffness in the muscles. The way his nails have changed color. I have seen this before. What happened to that man? Beatrice asked, her voice barely steady. My grandmother treated him with a root that grows deep in the forest near our village. Within days, he began to improve. Within weeks, he could walk again. The room went silent. Beatrice did not speak for what felt like a very long time. Then she asked, Why did you not tell me sooner? Nyasha lowered her eyes. I was afraid. I am just the care attendant. Who would believe me? Beatrice looked back toward the staircase that led to her husband's room. The sound of the heart monitor drifted faintly through the house. She had spent 6 months listening to doctors say they had no answers. She had spent a fortune on specialists who shrugged their shoulders and suggested more tests. How soon can you get this root? Beatrice asked. Nyasha looked up. If I leave tomorrow morning, I can be back by the evening of the next day. Beatrice did not hesitate. Go. Early the next morning, a car from the Okafor household drove Nyasha out of the city. The road stretched long and straight before curving into the countryside. After many hours, the car reached the outskirts of Moketsi. Nyasha stepped out and walked the familiar paths toward the forest. She moved through the trees with a certainty that surprised even her. Her feet remembered the way. Past the old marula tree, past the rock shaped like a fist, down the slope toward the stream. She knelt beside the water and dug into the earth just as her grandmother had done all those years ago. The root was there, dark, thick, and strong. She pulled it from the ground and held it in both hands. For a moment, she closed her eyes. Mama Thandeka, she whispered. Guide my hands. She gathered leaves and bark that she knew belonged to the mixture. She wrapped everything carefully in cloth and placed it in her bag. By the time the car pulled through the gates of the Okafor mansion the following evening, Beatrice was already waiting at the front door. "Did you find it?" Nyasha opened the bag. "Yes, ma'am. Everything is here." They went into the kitchen. Nyasha washed the root carefully. She peeled it and cut it into small pieces. She boiled the leaves separately and crushed the bark into a fine powder. Then she combined everything in a pot of warm water and stirred slowly. The mixture had a deep, earthy smell that filled the entire kitchen. Beatrice watched every step. "What do we do with it?" "He will drink a small amount each morning," Nyasha said, "and I will apply the rest to his skin at night, his joints, his legs, his arms, and along his spine." "For how long?" 3 days. If there is a change, we continue. If nothing happens, I will not ask you to trust me further." Beatrice looked at the dark liquid in the pot. Then she looked at Nyasha. "Let us begin tonight." That evening, Nyasha carefully lifted Emmanuel's head and brought the cup to his lips. He drank slowly. Some of the liquid ran down the side of his mouth, but most of it went in. Then she warmed the mixture for the skin and began rubbing it gently along his arms and legs. She worked in silence, pressing firmly but carefully, just as she had watched Mama Thandeka do so many times. The first night passed. Nothing changed. The second morning, Nyasha gave him the drink again. That afternoon, the family doctor arrived for his regular visit. He noticed the smell immediately. "What is that?" he asked Beatrice. "A traditional treatment," Beatrice replied calmly. The doctor frowned. "Mrs. Okafor, I must advise against this. Unverified substances could be dangerous." "Doctor, you have been treating my husband for 6 months," Beatrice said, her voice firm but not unkind, "and you still cannot tell me what is wrong with him." The doctor opened his mouth to speak, then closed it again. He examined Emmanuel in silence, wrote something in his file, and left without another word. The second night came. Nyasha applied the herbs again and gave him the drink. She stayed later than usual, sitting in a chair beside the bed. She watched his breathing, she watched his hands. Nothing. Around midnight, Nyasha's eyes grew heavy. She was about to stand and leave when she heard something. A sound so faint she thought she had imagined it. She looked at the bed. Emmanuel's right hand was moving. Not twitching. Moving. His fingers curled slowly inward, then opened again. Nyasha's breath caught in her throat. She leaned closer. Emmanuel's lips moved. No sound came out at first. Then, very slowly, a word formed. "Bear, trice." Nyasha's hands flew to her mouth. She stood quickly, ran to the hallway, and called out, "Ma'am, please come quickly." Beatrice appeared from her bedroom in seconds, tying her robe as she rushed down the hall. "What happened? Come, please." They entered the room together. Beatrice approached the bed. Emmanuel's eyes found hers. His lips moved again. "Beatrice, I am thirsty." Beatrice collapsed onto the bed beside him. She held his face in both hands. Tears streamed down her cheeks. She could not even speak. She just held him and cried. Nyasha quietly left the room to get water. When she returned, she helped him drink. Emmanuel looked at her with eyes that seemed clearer than they had been in months. "Thank you," he whispered. That night, nobody in the house slept. But for the first time in 6 months, it was not because of grief. The days that followed brought changes that no one in the household could believe. Emmanuel began moving his fingers regularly, then his wrists. By the 5th day, he could squeeze Beatrice's hand. By the end of the 2nd week, he could raise both arms above his head. Nyasha continued the treatment without missing a single day. She also began guiding him through small exercises. "Try to push against my hand, sir." She would hold her palm against his foot. At first, there was no resistance, then a little, then more. 3 weeks after the first dose, Emmanuel sat up in bed without assistance for the first time in 7 months. Beatrice stood in the doorway and covered her face with both hands. "My God," she whispered. "My God." A week later, they moved him to a wheelchair. Nyasha would push him through the garden. The sunlight touched his face and he closed his eyes and smiled. It was the first time Beatrice had seen him smile since the sickness began. Then came the morning that changed everything once more. Nyasha had just finished preparing the herbal drink in the kitchen when she heard Beatrice screaming from the living room. She dropped what she was holding and ran. Emmanuel was standing in the middle of the living room. No wheelchair, no walking stick, no support, just standing. His legs were trembling slightly, but he was on his feet. He looked at Beatrice. Then he looked at Nyasha. A tear rolled down his face. "I can feel my legs," he said. He took one step, then another. Beatrice ran to him and wrapped her arms around him. The household staff gathered at the doorway, some of them crying, some clapping. Nyasha stood quietly at the edge of the room. She did not clap, she did not cry. She just watched with a gentle smile. Inside her heart, she was speaking to her grandmother. "We did it, Mama." In the weeks that followed, news of Emmanuel's recovery spread quickly. Doctors from his hospital demanded to know what had happened. A team of 5 physicians sat in the living room one afternoon and questioned Nyasha for over an hour. "Describe the route," one of them said. "Describe the preparation. Describe the dosage." Nyasha answered every question calmly and thoroughly. She drew the shape of the route on a piece of paper. She explained the boiling process. She described the application method. One doctor leaned back in his chair and shook his head slowly. "We spent months running tests in state-of-the-art laboratories," he said, and the answer was growing in a forest. Another doctor spoke more gently. "Young lady, you may have discovered something that medical science has not yet documented. This is remarkable." 2 weeks later, the hospital held a small ceremony. They presented Nyasha with a recognition award and a monetary prize for her contribution to Emmanuel's recovery. Nyasha stood on the small stage as people applauded. She held the award close to her chest and thanked them quietly. But what she did next was what people talked about for a long time afterward. That same evening, Nyasha went to Portia's small room. She knocked on the door. When Portia opened it, Nyasha handed her a thick envelope. Portia looked at it. "What is this? Open it." Portia opened the envelope. Inside was a large portion of the prize money. Her eyes went wide. "Nyasha, no, I cannot accept this." "You can," Nyasha said firmly. "You brought me to this city when I had nothing. You gave me a roof. You fed me when I could not feed myself. Without you, none of this would have happened." Portia's eyes filled with tears. She pulled Nyasha into a tight embrace. "Your grandmother would be so proud of you," Portia said through her tears. Nyasha held her friend and said nothing. She did not need to. Meanwhile, Emmanuel and Beatrice had been having conversations of their own. Emmanuel was now walking through the house unassisted. His strength returned a little more each day. One evening after dinner, he asked Nyasha to join them in the dining room. The table had been cleared. Beatrice poured tea for the 3 of them. The room felt warm and quiet. Emmanuel looked at Nyasha with deep sincerity. "Nyasha," he said, "you gave me my life back. There is no amount of money that can repay that." Nyasha lowered her eyes. "I only did what my grandmother taught me, and that is exactly what makes it so special," Beatrice said. She reached across the table and held Nyasha's hand. Emmanuel continued. "Tell me something. If you could choose any future for yourself, what would it be?" Nyasha thought for a moment. The question was large, but the answer had lived inside her for as long as she could remember. "I would like to study medicine," she said. "I want to become a doctor, a real doctor with a degree. I want to combine what my grandmother taught me with what science has to offer. I want to open a clinic one day, a place where people who have no money can come for treatment, a place where traditional knowledge and modern medicine work together." The room went quiet. Emmanuel and Beatrice looked at each other. Something passed between them, a silent agreement. 2 days later, Beatrice asked Nyasha to come to the study. Emmanuel was already there, sitting in his chair. He looked stronger than he had in almost a year. "Sit down, Nyasha," Beatrice said. Nyasha sat. "We have made some arrangements," Emmanuel said. He opened a folder on the desk. "You have been accepted into the University of Cape Town's medical program." Nyasha's eyes went wide. Her lips parted, but no words came. "Your tuition, books, accommodation, and living expenses will be fully covered," Beatrice continued. Emmanuel reached into the folder and pulled out another document. "We have also established a trust fund in your name. When you complete your studies, the funds will be available for you to build the clinic you described." Nyasha stared at the papers. Her hands trembled. Tears began to fall silently down her cheeks. "Sir, ma'am, I do not know how to thank you." Beatrice smiled. "You already thanked us the night you saved my husband." Emmanuel nodded. "There is one more thing." He paused. "You will not return to that small room. From today, you live here with us. You are family." Nyasha covered her face with both hands and wept. Not from sadness, not from pain, but from the overwhelming feeling that everything her grandmother had told her was true, that the earth speaks to those who listen, that kindness returns to those who give it, that purpose finds those who are patient enough to wait. Months passed. Nyasha began her studies. Every morning, a car took her to the university. Every evening, she returned to the mansion and spent time with Emmanuel and Beatrice. She studied harder than anyone in her class. She carried a small pouch of dried herbs in her bag wherever she went, not for medicine, just to remember. One afternoon, sitting in the back seat of the car as the driver took her home from campus, Nyasha watched the city pass by through the window. The buildings, the people, the traffic, the noise. She thought about the village she had left behind, the small house, the forest, the stream where the root grew, the flat stone where she ground herbs with her grandmother. She thought about the day she arrived in this city with nothing but a torn suitcase and a piece of paper with an address written on it. And she thought about how strange life could be. How the things that seem like endings are sometimes only beginnings. How the knowledge passed down by an old woman in a forgotten village could reach the bedroom of the most powerful judge in Johannesburg and do what no machine and no specialist and no amount of money could do. A quiet smile crossed her face. She whispered so softly that only she could hear. "Thank you, Mama Thandeka. I will never stop making you proud." The car turned through the gates of the mansion. The sun was setting. The sky burned gold and orange above the city. Nyasha stepped out, held her books close to her chest, and walked inside. Dear friends, what do you think about this story? Do you believe Nyasha was simply in the right place at the right time? Or do you think something bigger was guiding her steps all along? I would love to hear your thoughts. Share your opinion in the comments below. I will be there reading every single one. And if this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. In the next few days, I will be sharing another story, one that will move you even deeper. So make sure you subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you do not miss it. Thank you so much for watching. I truly appreciate your time.